You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
I got Bantha.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
You're listening to Making Tracks, and a very special episode as we catch up with composer Jon Everist. Jon is the composer behind the new Star Wars Monopoly Heroes vs Villains game, which is out very, very soon, and also was one of the co-composers on Star Wars Outlaws. So here's Jon and myself discussing his career right here on Making Tracks.
Welcome to Making Tracks. I'm looking forward to talking about this. So how did this project come your way?
Yeah, I mean, I think video games is very similar to film in a lot of ways. I think that for this project in particular, in most of my projects, they're sort of developed through word of mouth. So friends that I've made throughout the years that I've worked on certain projects with, they sort of expand out as a project ends. Some people leave the studio, some people stay. You know, you keep seeing them sort of once a year at these conferences and stuff that we do. And you never know where people will land. And so it was sort of just kind of like that. You know, I worked with Ubisoft on Star Wars Outlaws with Will Roger, who was the primary composer for that. And I was one of the co-composers along with Kazuma Jinwochi as well. And the music director for that on the Ubisoft side ended up at the helm of this Monopoly game that they're working on, and sort of reached out to me several months after we'd finished with Star Wars Outlaws. And you know, I think we had like a good relationship on that project, and he liked the stuff that I did there. And it was sort of, you know, it's just like, you know, lend a hand sort of thing. You know, obviously this is my job, so it's not as much just about friendships, but it is a lot about that, I think.
When you get a game like Monopoly and Star Wars coming together, they've both got such strong identities. So where do you start? I guess it would be very easy for Star Wars to just completely take over and to forget that there's any Monopoly in there. But I guess you've got to make sure that that feels like it's part of the mix. So how do you balance the two things?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think for this game in particular, they sort of pitched it at the beginning and really let me know straight away that this is primarily a game targeted towards kids. You know, obviously anyone can play Monopoly, but we really wanted to lean into the childish fun of the game, which for me, you know, it's interesting with Star Wars. I think there's so much writing from Williams that is fun and childish in a way, and sort of whimsical and has this magical nature to it. So I think it lends itself well to that sort of vibe. So, you know, that's the approach there from sort of the genre or kind of like the emotional vibe of the tracks that we were trying to make. They also let me know really early on, like, we don't have access to any of the traditional IP for the Star Wars music. So we're really going to be treading new ground for this, which I found exciting, right? I think it's maybe it is fun, but I would say it's not as fun to just sort of recreate tracks with existing pieces of music. And then there's a difficult task of, like, you know, keeping things playful while still referencing Star Wars and also avoiding too much similarities with existing scores. So it's just one of those like interesting challenges as a composer where you have this, you know, once before when it's all just ideas, it's sort of, you can go anywhere and try anything. But when you have certain level of constraints of, here's the box we're living in, that's when the creativity starts to take over. So it was really fun.
That's an interesting point, because listening to the trailer, it's clear this is an original soundtrack. It's an original Star Wars soundtrack. And so you've added now new Star Wars music to the canon of Star Wars music. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that, because it would be, I guess, very easy. I'm sure fun, as you say. But it would be fun to be able to pull on the classic moments and the classic cues and such, and leitmotifs and all that. But you've got the chance to do something completely original, and there it is, you know, out there to the world.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, it's certain level of stress involved too, because you're dealing with one of my favorite IPs of all time, my favorite composers of all time. I love the universe so much, so you want to definitely give it its due service as far as like writing quality music. And I find those challenging, really enriching when working on projects. And yeah, so I found it inspiring. And I think the thing about Williams, the way he writes music for Star Wars is, I said this before, he just sort of has fun with the orchestra. And though we didn't get the budget to record with a full live orchestra with this, that was just my goal every time I sat down, from a whimsical, sort of childish place of having fun with the orchestra and playing to my 8-year-old self of what I would, think would be fun to hear in a game like this while I'm playing Monopoly with my family and friends and stuff.
I love the phrasing of whimsical and childlike, because that is so on the nose for what he does when you're a kid listening or watching Star Wars, and especially playing Star Wars, however you play Star Wars. That music is there and it hits all the emotions. So with you going for the same sort of tone and the same intent, it makes all the sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I still, listening to Williams scores for Star Wars, I have like a childlike wonder hearing his music, because it's so clear to me that he's having so much fun, and he wants every player in the orchestra to have fun too. Some people might think Williams' music can be busy and stuff like that, but I think everything is so intentional, and he's adding little flourishes here and there because it's fun, and because the players really have fun, and they light up when they play music like that, because they sort of always on their toes, and they're like thinking like, oh, what's coming next, and it creates this cohesiveness at the end that's really fascinating to me as a composer.
Hi, this is Robbie from Skeleton Crew, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
What's the process for pulling something like this together without knowing how it works? Do you see a version of the game? Are you shown scenes and working up themes and elements that way? How does it work? Where do you come into the process?
For this game, it was maybe a little bit different than other more traditional games, but I like to be involved as early as possible, usually. And for this game, I was involved pretty early, so I have usually access to concepts from the game, concept art from the game, as well as early game captures. So I think one of the first meetings I had with them, I saw early build of the game. A build of the game just means like a very early kind of animatic of what the game is going to look like. And, you see the board and you see the cantina, and they're kind of telling you like the vibe of what they're going for and how they want the players to feel as they're playing each turn and stuff like that. Those are the initial conversations that sort of get the gears turning as a composer. And then usually, and for this game, I was tasked with writing like a suite of music. So sort of like the Star Wars suite, right? I had like the heroes thematic moment, the bad guys thematic moment, and then a bridge between them and other sort of various like motifs that I could pull out. So that's what I wrote for this. It's kind of funny writing a suite of music for a Monopoly game, but it was the same sort of approach as even a larger game like Star Wars Outlaws, was doing a suite of music to sort of check if my inspiration is in line with the game developers' inspiration and their vision of what the music should sound like to them. And yeah, we calibrated pretty quickly on that. I mean, they wanted something that felt like Star Wars, but was more kid friendly. And because this is sort of a casual game where you're sitting down for between 10 minutes and maybe an hour and a half playing, they don't want it to be too in your face, abrasive, that sort of thing, and can handle like repetition. So that's a big part of it too. And another big thing with games is the interactivity element. So like I needed to understand how the game would function on an interactive level before I started writing, because it really it affects how I write every piece for the score. And so we sort of understood the basic level of how the mechanics of like you're starting with one person's going on their turn, and then there's a transition and the other person's going, and we wanted the music to seem seamless. So we had to write it in a way where the hero theme could easily transition into the villain themes, light and dark themes, without it seeming jarring or starting and stopping and that sort of thing. And there's interesting ways in music to write where you can transition subtly and kind of build off of existing music. So that was sort of like the base building block that I started with to start from there to write the score.
Those transitions then. So as you're playing, presumably the characters can go off and do different things as the game progresses. But your musical transitions, how do you construct it so that you can go left to a hero, go right to a villain, or whatever it might be? Because that sounds quite involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways. I mean, that's the interesting thing about writing music for non-linear media like games. There's so many tricks that you can use just using music theory to make things work. We used a pretty simple method, which is we wrote the music. I wrote the music at the same tempo and following the same sort of like emotional arc. Two different pieces, and then each piece can actually be split out in about 5 or 6 different layers as well. So they're changing kind of all the time depending on what's happening in the game. And when you transition from one piece to the next, I wrote it in a way so at each moment in the piece, they're in a related key. So they can do a transition that sounds musical and doesn't sound jarring and conflicting and too much dissonance. So that with like a few little tricks and some crossfading, feels like it's sort of the same track, but changing from a hero theme into a villain theme. It takes a lot of testing and concepting. And I would say on the whole, like for this game, it's a relatively simple approach. For games like Star Wars Outlaws and other stuff like that, we had very complex systems that are sort of like stacked and staggered and horizontal plus vertical randomization and still having to work. And with that score too, we were recording with a live orchestra. So there's that element as well of coordinating the recording process and making sure everything's organized and stuff like that. But yeah, it's simple yet elegant is what I always like to try to aim for with interactivity in music. I really focus on interactivity first before I start writing. And earlier in my career, I would always try to make the most complex, complicated interactive system possible. And I'm sort of at the point now where I'm of the mind of if it works, it works, and if it's simple and elegant, then that's better than complex and clunky.
If you were laying out the music that you've written, you say like a suite, or if I was stacking these pieces of music up to put on a CD or whatever it might be, would I be right in assuming that a lot of the musical pieces would be 10, 15, 20 seconds long, or is there more lengthy pieces in there? How does that work?
Yeah, for this game, each piece that you hear when you're playing is about 2 minutes long. So I think there's four 2-minute long pieces for the heroes and then 4 2-minute long pieces for the villains. And they're all written in this way so that they can be sort of interchangeable and going in and out from each other. They sound very different. The instrumentation's different. And they have different chord structures and stuff like that, but they're written in a way to where they can really move between each other and not be too dissonant or strange sounding. That's just for the gameplay. There's tons of other music for things like events that happen as you go around the board, as well as like cinematics. That was a cool thing about this project is we had 20 or so cinematics that are essentially just the biggest moments from Star Wars history, but sort of truncated, and their art style is, has this sort of like childish element to it. It's more cartoonish, a little more like Pixar style. And so each one of those is about 30 seconds or so of these like epic Star Wars moments. So that was an interesting thing. I never thought I would be writing like cinematic music for Star Wars Monopoly, covering these like gigantic moments, like Yoda and Luke is raising the X-Wing out of the swamp and stuff like that. I mean, so these moments that are just like in your mind as a kid and fan of Star Wars with the music of John Williams, of course, it's that task of like, okay, write me a 30-second version of that with original music. So it's a fun challenge. I mean, it was a very interesting and cool thing to do.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Star Wars Outlaws can't not talk about Outlaws. Smash hit, did fantastically well, nominated for a Grammy. The work on that, I can only assume, would feel very different to the work on this because they're very different kinds of releases, both from Ubisoft. Back to my first question, really, how did that come across your desk?
Yeah, I mean, that's another story of sort of the randomness of video game composing. Is my good friend is Will Roger, who I've known for 10 years or so. I used to live in Seattle. Will is from Seattle, or he lived in Seattle as well. And Will is an amazing composer. He's one of my favorite composers alive. And never in a million years did I ever think we would be collaborating together on a Star Wars project, let alone any project, really. But yeah, he came to me sort of randomly and asked if I would be interested in doing, helping him split up Star Wars Outlaws, this project that was coming up. And so the idea was myself, him, and Kazuma would sort of kind of cordon off the game based on these planets that you would be visiting and these crime syndicates that were involved in the game, and divide the score that way. And he wanted it to be sort of like have very different vibes. He wanted it to have very big Star Wars elements, but also have this gritty underworld sort of Andor style to it as well. But when he first approached me about doing the Star Wars game, I was like, I kind of had to look at him and say, like, are you sure you have the right composer for this? Because I do love writing for orchestra, but in my mind I'm thinking like, I'm gonna have to rewrite themes from existing Star Wars movies, and it sounds very difficult and very time consuming, and it's not something that maybe I'm best suited for. But he sort of reassured me that this combination of traditional Star Wars orchestral music with heavy use of analog synths and taking big risks, taking big leaps, sort of having this like freedom to express yourself as a composer, but in this universe of Star Wars that we all really, really love. That was a super, super exciting prospect for me. But yeah, it all started from Will, really, and I met Will so long ago. Was always such a big fan of his, and we became good friends. But yeah, I was never being his friend, thinking that he would be giving me a job one day. But it ended up happening. So I think it's one of those stories that we tell to composers that ask, how do you get gigs? It's like, I have no idea. You gotta make some friends and genuine friendships, and cross your fingers and hope it all works out, I guess.
That's life, isn't it? That's probably the best way to get through life, I think. Cross your fingers and hope for the best. With what you did work on Crimson Dawn. You did work with the world of Akiva, which was the big new world in the game. And it just strikes me, thinking back 30 years to Shadows of the Empire, when John McNeely did work for Black Sun. So you've been able to work on a crime syndicate in a similar kind of way. Now that music will be forever identified with Crimson Dawn, which is, Crimson Dawn first turned up in Solo. So John Powell did a bit of work, obviously composed Solo. But now going forward in the gaming realm, Crimson Dawn's music is your fingerprints are all over that. So in future Star Wars gaming, I assume that's something they can dip into if they want to do. Adding to the Star Wars canon, the musical canon, you're clearly a fan. So that must really give you a buzz.
So cool. I mean, I don't know if you can see, but I have like the Crimson Rain book back there. It was definitely like a pinch me moment, because, man, I mean, who doesn't remember their first time watching, seeing Darth Maul, or it's just still to this day, I sort of walk in my studio and I sit down, I have like the Star Wars Outlaws record on my wall, and I look at it, I'm like, wait a minute, this happened, like this is a real thing. And I think about the first time I watched Star Wars with my uncle when I was very little, and just being so blown away, and to think that little kid being like awestruck about this experience watching the movies would have put a small mark on the gaming franchise. At least it's incredible. I still am in shock. Definitely.
This is Charles Soule. You're listening to Fantha Tracks.
You've actually done Star Wars. You've created and contributed to the world of Star Wars. So that's tremendous. And for yourself as a professional, having that on your CV and high up on your CV, that must be a really great thing to be able to sort of just so you know, I did Star Wars Outlaws. That must be fantastic.
It is very cool. It's very cool. I'm such like it's difficult for me sometimes to even talk about it with people because obviously like I did leave a mark on the Star Wars Outlaws game, but then also Will is the primary composer for that game. He did so much of the heavy lifting there as well. I like to say, like, without Will, I don't think that the music, definitely the music would not be as successful as it was. So, like, for the Grammys and stuff, especially, like, I'll gladly hang the Grammy nomination thing on my wall, but all props goes to Will Roget because without him, I mean, this project would be totally different. And he did such a good job of managing it as well and allowing us as composers to sort of have feel like we had the confidence to be ourselves, right? Like you said, for the Crimson Dawn stuff, there's like, I use like 808 drums in it and have like really bizarre orchestral elements that are really not in the realm of what you would think would be in a game like this. And Will really liked it. And I was really pleased that he did. And then when Ubisoft really liked it and LucasArts, then you're like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And then also doing like the new Rebels theme that they had for this for Star Wars Outlaws was so incredibly cool too. And I wrote it at a time when I was super busy and stressed. I just moved to Barcelona. I was writing on my laptop at the time. We were trying to find an apartment. We were kind of like running between apartments, and Will assigned it to me. He was like, "Hey, do you want to write the new Rebels theme?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay." And so just one of those moments. And I remember he told me he like got out of a meeting at Lucas and they showed the theme and they were all loving it. And I was like, "This is just unbelievable." It's definitely a pinch me moment for sure.
Absolutely. I've got to ask, you mentioned you're in Barcelona. What were the celebrations like last night after Spain winning the World Cup?
Oh, they were epic. I mean, we have a 2-year-old, so we had him in bed and we were hanging out our window, just watching everyone running around the street, shooting fireworks and blocking traffic and going nuts. So it was awesome. It was what a fun game to watch. A great ending. So really cool.
It was a great ending. It really was. And for you next, what's next on your docket? What's that you can talk about, of course. There's always projects on the go that you can't talk about until such is the time. But is life busy for you at the moment?
Yeah. Life is busy, definitely. What I can talk about right now is there is a big transition from a Monopoly Star Wars game. We're going to go to doing a sci-fi cyberpunk horror game. So this game is called Graft, and it's by Harebrained Schemes, my longtime collaborator. I did the Lamplighters League with them and BattleTech and some other stuff. And so now they're working on, they've recently gone indie, and they're doing this really cool survival horror game that takes place in like a derelict AI, basically like planet out there in the galaxy somewhere. So a darker galaxy far away. But it's so funny because like I work on these projects sort of simultaneously at times. So I'm one morning I'm doing like whimsical orchestral music for Star Wars Monopoly, and then an hour later I'm shaking the walls with like the most disgusting music you've ever heard. My synths are all, So yeah, so that's the one I can talk about now, and some other stuff is some really cool stuff on the way also.
That sounds fantastic to be able to compartmentalize the two things, to go from the cyberpunk horror to the fun Star Wars stuff. Is quite a jump, isn't it?
It is. It's fun. It's an interesting way, like you said, compartmentalizing, and it's really invigorating too. Because when you write for orchestra for a while, you're like, I just want to like play with some synths for a little bit and take a break from all the orchestral stuff, and then vice versa. Working in the synth world, I was dreaming of doing a score like this, the Star Wars Monopoly stuff, which was quite surprisingly really, really, really fun. It was just fun orchestral music is all I can say about it. And the levity and the childlike stuff was just super, super interesting and fun to do.
If you had the opportunity, and fingers crossed you do, to ever return to the galaxy far, far away, where would you like to write your music about? Is there an era that you have always kind of gravitated to? Is there a film that you love more than the others? Is there a soundtrack of Williams that just really grabs you? Where would you love to go?
What a question. Gosh, anywhere would be amazing. But I would really love to go to like the Old Republic era. I feel like that would be quite interesting to me. I mean, Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, is one of my favorite video games of all time. And yeah, I think sort of like an era that is a little bit less trodden would be really interesting. But anywhere, I mean, the universe is so big and there's so many pockets of it that are fascinating, especially like the recent stuff with Andor and like it's just all amazing to me. So yeah, I would feel privileged to do anything for sure.
Well, congratulations on all your success. Hopefully we'll get to speak again at some juncture down the road, but many thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. It was awesome.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.